Hi, I'm Elena Hale. And if someone had told me 6 years ago that I'd run away from a Manhattan penthouse carrying a secret bigger than my marriage itself, I would have laughed. But that night, after my husband said just one sentence, "Kids ruin everything," my entire world collapsed. I walked away in the rain, carrying something he swore he never wanted, and it changed my life forever. Before I share the rest of my story, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you've ever faced an impossible choice in love, because trust me, you'll want to hear what happens next. The pregnancy test trembled in my hand as I stared at those two pink lines. My reflection in our Manhattan penthouse bathroom mirror showed a woman I barely recognized, eyes wide with equal parts terror and joy. 6 months ago, I'd married Nathan Hale, the man whose love felt like drowning and breathing at the same time. I'd spent the afternoon preparing his favorite meal, seared scallops with that truffle risotto he always ordered at Le Bernardin. The dining table gleamed with our wedding china, candles casting shadows that danced across the walls. My hand kept drifting to my still flat stomach, imagining the life growing inside. "You're glowing tonight," Nathan said when he arrived, loosening his tie with practiced ease. His dark eyes, the ones that had captured me in that boardroom 6 months ago, studied me with their usual intensity. I poured his wine, my fingers shaking slightly. "I have something to tell you." But before I could speak, he set down his glass with a decisive clink. "Actually, Elena, there's something we need to discuss." He leaned back, the Manhattan skyline glittering behind him through floor-to-ceiling windows. "I've been thinking about our future, about what I want us to be." My heart hammered. "Me too." "I don't believe in kids." The words fell between us like shards of glass. "They destroy everything. My mother taught me that when she walked out on us, said we were anchors dragging her down. Children ruin careers, marriages, dreams. I won't let that happen to us." The test in my pocket felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. I watched his mouth move, explaining his childhood trauma, his mother's abandonment, his father's bitterness. But all I heard was the echo of my own father's footsteps walking out our door when I was 6. "Elena, you understand, don't you?" Nathan reached for my hand across the table. "We have everything. Why would we risk it?" I nodded, the lie burning my throat. The candles flickered, and suddenly our penthouse felt like a beautiful prison. That night, I lay awake listening to Nathan's steady breathing, my hand pressed against my stomach. Rain pelted our bedroom windows, each drop sounding like a countdown. His words played on repeat. "Kids ruin everything." I thought about telling him, maybe if he knew, if he could feel what I felt. But then I remembered his face when he'd said it, not just determined, but disgusted. The way he'd spat out the word children like it tasted bitter. By 3 a.m., I'd made my decision. I slipped out of bed, padding barefoot across our marble floors to the guest room where I kept my old suitcase, the one from before Nathan, before the penthouses and charity galas and wine that cost more than most people's rent. I packed methodically, choosing practicality over sentiment. Jeans instead of designer dresses, sneakers instead of Louboutins, my grandmother's ring instead of the Cartier pieces Nathan had given me. Each item I folded felt like shedding a layer of someone I'd tried to become. The next morning, Nathan left for his board meeting at 7 a.m. sharp, kissing my forehead with distracted affection. "Don't wait up tonight. The Tokyo merger might run late." I waited until his town car disappeared into Manhattan traffic. Then I called the only person I could trust. "Harper, it's me. I need help." My college roommate didn't ask questions. Within an hour, she was at my door, taking in my suitcase and tear-stained face. "Where are we going?" "Somewhere he won't think to look. Somewhere quiet." We drove in silence until the city skyline faded in the rearview mirror. It wasn't until we stopped for gas in Pennsylvania that I finally broke down, sobbing into Harper's shoulder at a rest stop while truckers pretended not to stare. "I'm pregnant," I whispered, "and I'm terrified." Harper held me tighter. "We'll figure it out. You're the strongest person I know." But I didn't feel strong. I felt like a fraud who'd stolen away in the morning like a thief, leaving only a note. I need time to think. Please don't look for me. E. Asheville appeared through the October mist like something from a fairy tale. Mountains cradled the town in purple-blue shadows, so different from Manhattan's steel and glass. Harper had suggested it. Her aunt owned a cabin that had been empty since summer. The cabin was more rustic than I'd imagined. Wood floors that creaked with every step, a kitchen with appliances older than me, and a persistent leak in the bathroom. But it had a porch that overlooked the valley, and when I stood there that first morning, breathing mountain air that tasted like pine and possibility, I felt something unknot in my chest. The local clinic was a converted Victorian house with flower boxes and a hand-painted sign. Dr. Sarah Chen had kind eyes and gentle hands as she moved the ultrasound wand across my belly. "Well," she said, her voice carefully neutral, "this explains why you're showing so early." I gripped the paper-covered table. "What do you mean?" She turned the monitor toward me, and there they were, two tiny hearts beating in rhythm. "Congratulations, Elena. You're having twins." The room spun. Twins, two babies, alone. Dr. Chen must have seen the panic because she squeezed my shoulder. "There's a wonderful support group for single mothers that meets Thursdays, and my nurse, Bethany, runs a pregnancy yoga class." I nodded numbly, staring at those two flickering hearts on the screen. They were so small, so fragile, but so stubbornly alive. Just like their mother would have to be. That night, I sat on the cabin porch with a cup of tea, talking to my belly for the first time. "Okay, little ones, it's just us now. I don't know how we're going to do this, but we will. I promise you that. You'll never wonder if you're wanted. Never." A shooting star streaked across the mountain sky, and I chose to take it as a sign. Winter arrived early, and with it came the reality of single pregnancy. Morning sickness that lasted all day. Swollen feet that barely fit in my sneakers. Nights spent wedged between pillows, trying to find a position where both babies would stop practicing gymnastics. I found work doing freelance PR for local businesses. The yoga studio, a craft brewery, a farm-to-table restaurant. It wasn't Manhattan money, but it kept the lights on and let me work from the cabin. The owner of the restaurant, Marcus, would sometimes bring by leftover soup, claiming he'd made too much. "You're too thin," he'd say, setting containers on my porch. "Babies need a well-fed mama." The support group became my lifeline. 6 women in various stages of single motherhood meeting in the basement of a Methodist church. There was Lydia, whose husband had died in Afghanistan. Keiko, who'd left an abusive marriage. And Patricia, who'd chosen to have a baby alone at 42. "The hardest part," Patricia said one snowy Thursday, "isn't the stuff you expect. It's the little moments. No one to share the first kick with. No one to run to the store at 2 a.m. for pickles." She was right. When baby A, I'd started calling them A and B, kicked for the first time, I reached for my phone to call Nathan before remembering. I sat in the dark cabin, hand on my belly, whispering, "I felt that, sweet one. I'm here." The 20-week ultrasound revealed 2 girls. Sophia and Grace, I decided, watching them move on the screen. Strong names. Names that meant wisdom and divine favor. Things they'd need in a world where their father didn't want them to exist. Sometimes, late at night, I'd catch myself checking Nathan's social media through a fake account. He looked the same. Polished, powerful, untouchable. The gossip blog said he'd thrown himself into work since his wife's mysterious disappearance. They speculated about affairs, about my mental health, about secret rehab stints. If only they knew the truth was simpler and sadder. I'd left because I'd loved him too much to force him to be something he couldn't be. Labor started during an April thunderstorm. I'd been organizing the nursery, a tiny room I'd painted soft yellow, when the first contraction hit. By the time Harper arrived, she'd driven down from D.C. the week before, I was pacing the cabin like a caged animal. "It's time," I gasped between contractions. The drive to the hospital was a blur of breathing exercises and Harper's terrible jokes trying to distract me. Why don't they let pregnant women swim in the ocean? Because they're afraid of causing a tidal wave. 17 hours later, Sophia arrived screaming. all dark hair and attitude. Grace followed 4 minutes behind, quiet and observant even then. When the nurse placed them on my chest, skin to skin, the world reorganized itself around these two tiny humans. "You did it," Harper whispered, tears streaming down her face. "Elena, you did it." But alone in the hospital room at 3 a.m., nursing both babies while my body screamed in protest, the weight of single motherhood crashed over me. How would I do this? How could I be enough for two humans when I barely felt like enough for myself? Grace opened her eyes, Nathan's eyes, dark and knowing, and stared at me with such trust that my heart cracked and mended simultaneously. "I'll figure it out," I promised her. Somehow. The first months were a haze of feedings and diapers and endless laundry. The cabin's quirks, the creaky floors, the temperamental hot water heater became obstacles to navigate with two infants. More than once, I found myself crying in the shower when I managed to get one, wondering if Nathan had been right about children ruining everything. But then Sophia would smile, a real smile, not gas, or Grace would grab my finger with her impossibly tiny hand, and I'd remember. They hadn't ruined anything. They'd saved me from a life where I'd have slowly disappeared, one compromise at a time. 3 years passed in a blur of first steps, first words, and endless loads of laundry. The girls grew into miniature people with distinct personalities. Sophia bold and demanding, Grace thoughtful and sweet. We'd built a life in Asheville. Not glamorous, but ours. I was pushing them on the swings at Carrier Park when I saw him. Even from behind, I knew that posture, that way of standing like he owned the ground beneath his feet. Nathan turned, and our eyes met across 20 feet of playground mulch. Time stuttered. "Mama, push!" Sophia demanded, kicking her legs. But I was frozen, watching Nathan walk toward us with the inevitability of a storm system. He looked older, tired. The arrogant edge that had once attracted me had been worn down to something raw. "Elena," my name on his lips sounded like a prayer and a curse. "Nathan." I kept my voice steady, though my hands shook on the swing chains. "What are you doing here?" His eyes moved to the girls, their dark hair, Grace's familiar eyes, and I saw the exact moment understanding dawned. His face went white. Does it matter now?" The words came out sharper than intended. Grace had stopped swinging, studying this stranger with her usual intensity. Sophia, never one for stillness, jumped off mid-swing and marched over. "Who are you?" she demanded, hands on tiny hips. Nathan dropped to one knee, bringing himself to her eye level. "I'm an old friend of your mother's." "Mommy doesn't have old friends," Sophia announced. "She has Harper and Marcus and Miss Patricia." I almost laughed at the devastation on Nathan's face. Almost. "Girls, why don't you go play on the slides? Mommy needs to talk to her friend." They ran off, but Grace kept looking back, and I knew there would be questions later. 3 years, Elena. His voice broke. 3 years of private investigators and dead ends, and you were here the whole time? You said you didn't want children. I wrapped my arms around myself. I gave you what you wanted. By stealing mine? The anger flashed then, the Nathan I remembered. They were never yours. You made that clear over dinner and expensive wine, remember? Kids ruin everything. Well, these kids ruined nothing. They made everything. Nathan showed up at the cabin that evening. I'd been expecting it, dreading it, but when his rental car pulled up the dirt drive, my heart still hammered. You can't just appear and expect, I started. I'm not expecting anything. He looked exhausted, sitting on my porch steps in his expensive suit like a lost boy. Can we talk? Please? Against my better judgment, I made coffee. We sat on the porch while the girls played in their room, their laughter carrying through the windows. I need you to know something, Nathan said, staring at the mountains. The company's gone, or will be, soon. My business partner, Daniel Cross. You remember him. He orchestrated a hostile takeover, used information he got from... It doesn't matter. I've lost everything. I studied him over my mug. This wasn't the Nathan who'd needed to control everything. Why are you telling me this? Because for 3 years I threw myself into that company. Told myself it was what mattered, and now it's gone, and all I can think about is that night. The look on your face when I said, he couldn't finish. When you said children destroy everything. My mother left when I was 8, said we were anchors, dragging her down from her dreams. I spent my whole life believing that was true. That love meant loss. That family meant pain. Grace appeared in the doorway, clutching her stuffed elephant. Mama, Sophia won't share the crayons. Before I could respond, Nathan asked quietly, What's your elephant's name? Grace studied him suspiciously. Mr. Peanuts. That's a good name. I used to have a bear named Captain Fluff. A tiny smile cracked Grace's serious expression. That's silly. It was silly, Nathan agreed, but I loved him anyway. Watching them, something shifted in my chest. Not forgiveness, not yet, but maybe the possibility of it. After I'd gotten the girls to bed, Nathan was still on the porch. I know I have no right to ask, but can I know them? Not as their father, not yet. Just, can I know them? I thought about Sophia's fearlessness, Grace's gentle soul, thought about my own father, who'd walked away and never looked back. You'll never hurt them, I said. It wasn't a question. I'll never hurt them, he swore. Nathan rented a house 2 streets over, close enough to visit, far enough to give us space. He started showing up for Saturday morning pancakes, teaching Sophia to flip them while Grace carefully set the table. Mr. Nathan? Grace asked one morning, syrup dripping down her chin. Why do you look sad sometimes? Nathan glanced at me before answering. Because I made some big mistakes, and I'm trying to fix them. Mommy says everyone makes mistakes, Sophia chimed in. You just have to say sorry and try better. Your mommy's very smart, Nathan said softly. The girls didn't know he was their father. That would come later, when trust had been rebuilt. But they absorbed him into their lives with the easy acceptance of children. He fixed our leaky faucet, built a treehouse in the backyard, and never once complained about the chaos of life with 3-year-olds. Daniel Cross tried to strike one more time, spreading rumors about my abandonment to hurt Nathan's legal standing. But Patricia, it turned out, was a retired family lawyer with a vindictive streak. Nobody messes with my support group girls, she said, serving Daniel with a cease and desist that made him slink back to Manhattan. One evening, after the girls were asleep, Nathan and I sat on the porch swing he'd installed. The mountains were purple in the twilight, and somewhere a mockingbird was singing. I'm not asking you to forgive me, he said, but I need you to know they didn't ruin anything. You were right. They made everything. They made me understand what I'd lost. He pulled out a worn envelope. Inside was a letter, handwritten on legal pad paper. I wrote this to them, for when you're ready, for when they can understand. I read it by porch light, tears blurring the words. Dear Sophia and Grace, I didn't know how to love until you taught me. Your mother gave me the greatest gift by protecting you when I couldn't protect myself. I'm not saying no, I told him, folding the letter carefully. I'm saying let's rebuild first. 6 months later, on a morning when frost sparkled on the mountains, Sophia looked up from her cereal and asked, Are you our daddy? Nathan's coffee mug trembled. Would that be okay? Grace climbed into his lap, Mr. Peanuts squished between them. I think so. Daddies stay, right? This one does, Nathan promised, voice thick. This one stays forever. I watched them, my girls and their father, and felt the last walls around my heart crumble. We weren't a fairy tale. We were something better. A family that had fought for each other, scars and all. Later that night, Nathan proposed with my grandmother's ring, the one I'd taken when I left. You kept it, I whispered. I kept hoping, he said. We married the following spring in our backyard, the mountains bearing witness. Sophia and Grace threw flower petals with enthusiasm that sent guests diving for cover. Harper cried. Marcus catered. Patricia officiated with a wink and a prayer for second chances. As Nathan spun our daughters on the dance floor, their laughter echoing off the mountains, I pressed a hand to my growing belly. Our son, due in winter. Sometimes walking away is the only way to find your path home. Sometimes broken things, when mended, are stronger than they were before. And sometimes, just sometimes, love is worth the risk of everything.
Sometimes, walking away isn't failure. It's the only way to protect yourself and the ones you love. Never let anyone define your worth or your dreams. True love isn't built on promises, but on actions and the courage to change.